Aloha, namaste. This is Alexis with Radha Home Yoga, and I'm here to talk about our full moon in Sidereal Capricorn that's happening this Thursday, August 11th. And it's in a star called Dhanistha. Dhanistha is the star that refers to our steadiness, our consistency. It bridges Capricorn and Aquarius, and it takes what we've been learning, what we've been doing, and what we've been hearing, and brings it into the practical realm, making it tangible. Dhanistha is ruled by the 8 Vasu, and these are the rays of light. So it's the elements, the earth, fire, air, water, and space or sky, and the stars, the sun, and the moon, so the luminaries. And these rays of light are sort of the original manifestation, right? We had the Big Bang, as people from a scientific perspective might know it. From the Christian perspective, in the beginning, there was the word was God. From the Vedic perspective, there was the original, very similar to a Big Bang, which is the separation of Shiva and Shakti. And from that separation, everything began to be born. And the creator, Brahma, had come out of him the sound, Om, the that we hear, which is the primordial sound. And from that, everything came into being. But of course, first was sun, stars, moon, and then the earth itself began to form from the elements. So there's this quality of everything that could be, all this potential, and actually exploding into being, into matter. And the quality of earth from Capricorn moving into the air sign of Aquarius is one where we're taking this sort of very basic quality of the tangible physical world and launching it into a world of ideas, that the mind can create all these different worlds and all these different realities that are beyond just rocks and fire and water and this sort of basic elemental reality. So it's a really powerful star for showing each of us in our lives how we progress into what it is that we actually want to manifest in this world, and how much of what we manifest is what we actually chose or wanted or were working on. So a thing that often comes up when I do readings for people is this sort of dissonance between who you actually are and who you believe you are, because we all have our inner self and our reality within our internal self, where we have thoughts and feelings and we're the protagonist of our own play, and everything we do has a reason and an intention, and we meant it this way and we didn't mean to do that, and we wanted this to be like this and it didn't turn out that way. And when I work with a star like Dhanistha, I see how the difference in what you actually do, your actions, which is your karma. Karma is action. So the things that you actually do, not what you thought you were going to do or kind of wanted to do or believe you meant to do and your intentions were there, but what you actually do, how that affects and determines what your future choices are and what's actually in front of you. And also how other people see you and what you accomplish in the world and what recognition or status you leave in the world. This is a very important thing to understand, because people do often live wrapped up in their own internal world, not really thinking about the difference between their internal reality and that which other people witness, experience, and the effect they have on the world around them. And I know this just by being a human and walking around and being fairly aware, seeing how people don't want to go enjoy nature, but then don't think about the fact that they're littering in nature and that's ruining it and making it less able for them to go enjoy it. or, people who have really strong beliefs on environmentalism and, promote voting in that direction, but their actual lives are massively consumeristic, and they're greatly depleting the earth's resources just through their own existence. So there's a lot of disconnect people have between what they're actually doing and what they think they're doing. And Dhanistha really pulls this into sight for us, so we can actually see, what have you created and what do you have to show for yourself. The root of Dhanistha is usually spoken of as wealth, because the word Dana means wealth. And so this can be a steadiness of wealth, a consistency of wealth, which we can see when you have consistent actions and you consistently do things again and again and again, it's going to equal wealth of some sort. Now, that's evolved a lot over time. Perhaps people who have really consistent, steady actions and show up to their job every day, or do some kind of work that's manual, physical, as Capricorn would bring us into that, worker caste, where we use our hands and we build things and we make things into being. That profession has been, largely demoted in our society, and we've really uplifted those who sit in positions that actually do less, where they're physically actually accomplishing less, but they're in charge of the people who are accomplishing things, and so therefore make more money. So we might not see that consistent action relative to wealth the same way that it maybe should be, but we'll see that there's some kind of wealth accrual that comes, whether it's, not necessarily monetary, but when you do things consistently, you're going to have a wealth of some sort. If you show up and exercise consistently, you're going to have a wealth of health. If you consistently show up for your relationships, you're going to have a wealth of friendships and love in your life. If you show up for whatever your passions are, you're going to have that grow and become something that holds you in a way that wealth does. So we don't necessarily need to think of wealth just in terms of money. The other definition is, if you take off the from Dana, Dan itself is sound. And this really makes sense because the symbol of Dhanistha is the drum, and that consistent, steady rhythm that the drum provides us with, not just in song, but in terms of our heartbeat, our original drum beat that we have. In the Vedic stories, we have Shiva meting out time with his drum. So we have this sort of consistent rhythm that marks time for us, and also allows us to show up without having to think our way through it all the time. If you've ever done something consistently, like had a physical practice that you've done every day, particularly, your body grows a memory and you're able to show up again and again in that same way without thinking about it so much. I mean, certainly any, famous athlete or Olympian or anything like that would have to have a lot of muscle memory in whatever it is they're doing. But I've even experienced on much lower levels of physicality where my body just knows what to do because I've done it so many times before. Whereas when you're learning something new, you have to really kind of fumble through it and remind yourself again and again, bring your brain back into it in order to get yourself to show up. But the more you practice, the more it becomes like second nature to you. So this steadiness, this rhythmic flow that we can choose to tap into, and we can even choose it not even necessarily doing anything with our body, but breathing. So just in forming breath, when I teach yoga classes, the very beginning of class, I have people focus on their breath and really just see where they're at. Is your breath choppy and all over the place? Is it steady? Do you feel consistency between the inhales and exhales? Where are you at? Some people hold their breath all the time and are constantly putting themselves in a state of fear without necessarily knowing that or understanding that. So just being aware of how we are already with our breathing is important. And then from there, we move into often an ujjayi breath, which is this consistent warrior breath. Jai is victory. And I always say it's the victorious breath. It's the victory is when we show up again and again and again, and eventually we see a result. We don't always see the result right off the bat. So this is a really important thing to understand when we're looking at our life as a whole and what we have and have not actually accomplished, or what we actually have in our life. Beyond our accomplishments, do we have, Do you have love? Do you have a career? Do you have a home? What are the things you've built in your life, and what are they showing you? And particularly because this moon is joined Saturn retrograde, who's been, really teaching us some lessons since January of 2020 when he first moved into this position, we're really being called to reflect upon what we're committed to. Capricorn is Saturn's sign, and ever since Saturn moved into this placement, we've, you know, we've been shown the futility of our efforts. We've been shown how we might, we might experience disappointment, we might experience loss, we might experience death, or at least sickness or aging. We might experience a lot of loss. And the humbleness that brings for us, the humility, the sort of facing of reality that we have to do when we're faced with Saturn's energy, and even in just Capricorn itself, allows us to come back to the bare basic bones, that practical essence of like, what are we physically doing with our time? What are we committed to? How do we spend our energy? Because there's a limit to our energy. There's a limit to our time. And if we continue to spend it in this way over here, that isn't actually what we want, but it's the pressure we feel from our family or from our friends or from society or from our job, or because this is what we were taught we had to do, whatever the different reasons are that we show up for things that aren't really part of our heart's path or what we truly want in this world, that's going to come back to us, because that's what we're going to have to show, a life that we don't necessarily even want to be leading. If we've been committing to things that are really aligned and really feel good to us and are on our path, then we're going to be reaping the benefits of that. So Saturn, often gets a very bad rap in all astrology, not Vedic astrology, particularly Western astrology also. But there's this sort of fearful notion like, Saturn, oh, what is Saturn going to do to me? My Saturn return, my sati sati when Saturn's on your moon, which essentially, this is sort of an example of that when we have Saturn on the moon, but this is a collective experience. And when Saturn's on someone's natal moon, it lasts 7.5 years, 2.5 on it, 2.5 in the sign before, and 2.5 in the sign after. This is a quick transit. The moon will move past Saturn quickly. And so it's not the same thing, but this feeling of pressure, of fear, of lack of time, of not enough time, of all the worries and all the anxieties and all the things that could go wrong is going to be present. And because it's in Capricorn, which is Saturn's own sign, it's very realistic. It's like, yep, these things can go wrong. You're definitely getting older. You certainly will die one day. Of the cold, hard facts, like for sure, these things that you're seeing that are wrong or don't feel good are there. And so we have a choice that's either to accept this reality and to even embrace it and move beyond what we have as expectations or what we think we want, and really look at what we are truly putting our energy into. Or we have the choice to feel, very depressed and sad and dive into that chasm between what we want and what we have. And so this is a big sort of separation of our evolution here, where we can really see how far we've evolved. Saturn brings up that part of us that has to face, are we just living in the light all the time and thinking that everything is going to be okay if we, take these special medicines or herbal remedies, or if we follow this path or wear these clothes or hang out with this crowd or do this thing, is this really going to make our lives feel complete, and are we going to be happy, or does our happiness come from a different place? And Saturn's the one who teaches us our happiness comes from really being able to be alone with ourselves. Saturn is a planet of solitude, and it's a planet of meditation above all else. So ultimately, when we sit in meditation, we are alone with ourselves and not our external self and not our social self. and not how we look in the mirror or all these other factors, but we're like alone with our soul, and our capacity to be there and be comfortable there will really come alive in Saturn's presence. And this transit of Saturn back in Capricorn, because he did move into Aquarius for a brief moment from April to mid-July, this opportunity, as I look at it, to revisit what we already sort of went over and to internalize the experience, because he's retrograde. So instead of just having the fear be outside of us and the sort of oppressive energy coming from the outside, it's more internalized. We have a chance to really sort of pinpoint where we go awry, where we make the choices that are more fear-based and less committed to truth or committed to the actual reality we want to live and we want to manifest. So we often, have an idea of what our life should look like, and we have something sort of close to that, like relationships, a good way to demonstrate that, where we have an ideal partner and an ideal way in which we want our life to look, and we meet somebody who fits all those ideals, and so we set off with them. Or maybe we have this passion and this love for someone who doesn't really fit any of those external ideals, and we set off with them. And then somewhere along the line, we realize, well, this person isn't actually who I love, in case A, or isn't somebody who will ever be living a life or want to create a life that is anything like what I want to live, case B. So what have I committed to? I committed to a dream, but I committed to it with somebody that was never really going to be a part of that dream. And so Saturn is asking us on every level of our life, but particularly whatever house Capricorn is for you, to really look at the disconnect between what it is that you thought you were committing to and what you've actually committed to. And it's a big difference more often than not for people. I shouldn't say more often than not. Some people have made really solid choices along the way. And again, it really depends on what house it is for you. So for each of the different rising signs, this is a different house. And for, Cancer people, Cancer rising people, I mean, not your sun sign in Cancer, this is going to be your 7th house. So it's really going to be looking at your relationships. And the answer isn't always you've committed to the wrong thing. Sometimes you've committed to the right thing, and you need to make different choices, perhaps in how you're relating to somebody, or, bring in other wisdom or other tools in order to continue forward in a good way. But everything is actually pretty solid and built on a solid ground. So when we question things, it doesn't mean that the answer is always, nope, it hasn't been solid ground, we started with a faulty foundation. It just means that we're looking at it. And perhaps even if the foundation was really solid, maybe something along the way was not in full integrity, and we need to shift that. So Saturn really forces us to be honest more than anything else. Now, this Saturn moon you can see is right across from Venus and the sun. Now, the sun and moon are always across from each other in a full moon. That's what makes a full moon full. The reflection of the sun on the moon lights it up. Well, Venus being here and this being Cancer, where we had our new moon 2 weeks ago, brings up that dichotomy, that opposition energy of unconditional love, emotions being everything, really diving into our feelings and our feeling nature, and having that be more important than the practicality and, seriousness of Capricorn. So full moons are always showing us this point in our new moon cycle where we have to look at the other side of things. In a Cancer cycle, it's like, the emotions are everything. We're feeling maybe particularly weepy, particularly needy, and maybe like we're doing a lot to kind of keep everyone in our life. And what else can I do to unconditionally love everyone so they love me back? This is the sort of shadow side of Cancer. And then the full moon is like, be practical, be serious, see that you're all alone, especially this particular full moon with Saturn there. See all the ways in which your efforts do not produce results. See how you can give and give and give and never get what you want in return. And one of the main reasons that particular thing is happening right now, as opposed to when the new moon cycle set off, is because the moon in her own sign of Cancer is in her own element. right? So the unconditional love is coming from a more integral place. Venus now being in Cancer is a very different story. Venus is where we are in relationship. We are wanting to be met mutually. There's a give and there's a take. And I don't just give and give and give. I give and get, I give and get, I get and give. It's this back and forth, this mutuality, this capacity to compromise, and this capacity for both parties. And it's not just romantic relationships. This is, business partnerships. This is any two adults with mutual needs on the table. Even once your children get old enough, it becomes more of a Venus relationship where it's like both parties need to bring something to the table. And when Venus is in Cancer, we often feel like we're not getting our fair share. And it's not because the other person isn't giving us our fair share. What's funny about Venus, particularly when it's transiting Cancer, meaning we're all experiencing this transit. Venus is in Cancer for all of us, not just in one person's chart. What we experience is that the other person also thinks they're giving too much. So both parties are giving and giving and giving, and neither one feels like they're getting what they need in return. And the reason is because they're giving from a place of like a mother giving to their child, this sort of unconditional love, I know what you need, even kind of attitude. I'm giving from a place of what I know you need. Whereas in adult relationships, you don't know what the other person needs. You ask them and you allow them to tell you, and you are adult enough to express your needs and feelings so that the other person knows what you need and want. And sometimes that other person isn't available to give you what you need and want, and you need to fill that hole for yourself or find a friend or a therapist or something else. So in adult relationships, that's not how we actually operate. With your children, of course, that's appropriate. But in Venus's world, we're not talking about children, we're talking about relationships. And so this can really cause a lot of problems in relationships where we feel all this emotion and all this sort of, connectivity and desire to connect, but we're going about it in the wrong way. We're connecting like a little kid connects, where they just rub up against you and put their head in your lap and is like, please just take care of me. And if we're not getting that, we'll give that back. But no adult is really going to give you back what you want in return if that's how you're treating them. If you're being like a mother to a child, to another adult, their reaction is going to be more like a child, not to be like an adult showing up in the way you want them to. So this is one reflection that's going to be very interesting right now, where Venus is pretty newly in Cancer. And we've had, Mercury pass through this point already. So we've had our communication sort of go through this weepy place. The sun operates better in Cancer than Mercury and Venus, but we still see that our power is coming from this source of unconditional love. And if we can allow ourselves to hold that unconditional love, not only for other people, but for ourselves, but not have that dictate our actions, in the sense that we're not trying to make people love us. We are being in full integrity and truth in our love for people. And you can love someone and not do what they want for you. You can love someone and not cook them a meal, or not clean up their mess, or forgive them for the upteenth time for doing something that's really not appropriate or crosses your boundaries. So there's ways of having that connection with your source of love and with that mother-like energy without having it create problems in your relationship, because it's coming from more of a selfish, actually, and needy place. Now, the sun is in a star called Aslacia, and Aslacia can be the clinging star. It's the star that's represented by serpentine energy, which can be very powerful and can release us from our holds in this world, but it can also be the place where we hold on too tight, where we are so attached that we can't let go. And so this is an important thing to recognize, is where are we gripping? Where are we refusing to release? Just like a snake coils itself around something and then squeezes so tight that it can ultimately kill that thing. How are we squashing something? By being so attached and refusing to allow it the room and air it needs in order to breathe. So this is a question we can ask ourselves right now. One of the other things that's come up for us is, Mars and Rahu were really tightly conjunct. I spoke about this a lot in my last 3 videos, and I had a report going up, which I'm just now taking down, of Mars and Rahu conjunct in Aries and all this sort of dispersive fire energy. There was, of course, right up to August 1st was the pitch date, the highest date where they were in exact conjunction. And we did see fires in Northern California, and we saw accidents, some really bad accidents I saw when I was traveling in Southern California. There was even like a shooting in Florida in this nightclub. So I was kind of traversing the mainland during this time and saw a number of different examples of this energy come out, not only in interpersonal relationships too. There's this sort of dispersive anger and stuff like that. So Mars separating and moving into Taurus is a big it's a big relief in many ways, but it's also Mars moving into less strength, less intelligence. So Mars in his own sign, is more likely to be disciplined and more likely to be active and courageous. And Mars in Taurus, we can get a little lazy. We can get a little bit too focused on spending our physical energy in ways that give us pleasure and happiness and comfort and ease, and peace, which feels, like I said, particularly good on the heels of this Mars Rahu conjunction. But it can also make us fall off of some of our habits or patterns or things that we might have really cultivated while Mars was in Aries. So it's good to recognize, again, that steady showing up again and again and again. The more we cultivate that in our lives, the more, no matter what is happening, we'll still be able to do that. Pardon me, I have a little bit of a runny nose, so I have to take a minute there. But this quality of having habits that you do no matter what is one of the most important qualities of Mars, because that really also keeps us from spraying our anger out at other people and forcing them to experience our form of discipline on them. When we're able to discipline ourselves, we don't feel like other people are responsible for our anger, which is ultimately what we're doing when we're disciplining other people. We're telling them that the problem is them and that they are, the reason that we're not disciplined enough, or that we are experiencing whatever we're experiencing with them. Because if we were just showing up for ourselves in such a consistent manner, no matter how crazy someone else's behavior is, we would just probably remove ourselves from that situation. Most, truly in tune warrior people, if you think about, the martial arts and things like this, they're generally not teaching aggression. They're generally teaching sort of defense and moving out of the way of whatever it is that's coming at you. And of course, only needing to use that, striking that force when it's necessary. This might not be true for all martial arts. I'm definitely not that knowledgeable about that, but I know that many of those forms of combat are actually teaching you how to get out of combat and not to aggress or agitate or make it worse. Most of what people do with Mars energy in this current day that I see is actually agitating other people. When people show up again and again for themselves physically and get that anger out by streaming it into a consistent physical practice, they're less likely to spray it out at everybody else in all these other ways. And so that consistency, if it's been cultivated earlier on at some other point or some other transit, you might be able to still show up in that way in Taurus. Taurus does have that earth energy. It is consistent, it is steady, and it's calm. It's just not as driven. It's not as driven towards competing or winning or even being stronger. It's more driven towards peace and comfort and ease and food and things like that. So there could be, sudden dietary, discipline that you want to bring into your life or something like that. And as long as it's really in line with your values and where you want to go, then that's beautiful. That can be an opportunity to really hone in some parts of your life that are pleasure bound or can bring us down paths of gluttony or lack of health and things like that. So overall, our planets are giving us an opportunity here to really look at ourselves and look at the ways in which we've been accepting or not accepting what's around us. You know, if you got really agitated during that Mars Rahu transit and you were really finding yourself getting in a lot of fights with people, that's something to look at. Maybe you need to commit over here to more meditation, to more, you know, self-reflection, and really look at what you spend your time on. And maybe you're spending your time in the company of people that are agitating, or you're going places or doing things, engaging in things that are not allowing you peace, and you need to look at that. Maybe this is a time when you felt really overworked and underappreciated, or like you're giving and giving and giving and you're not getting in return. And the emotionality that you felt around it has been overwhelming you. And it's a time for you to get practical and look at it from, you know, you can cry as many rivers as you want, but at some point, what are you doing? What are you doing to change the circumstances of that? Because we can't just play victim forever, right? We need to make choices that lift ourselves up, or that look really realistically at what's in front of us and what we need to do to get where we want to be, and where we even want to be to begin with. And then our speech, our communication is another area to look at, because Mercury in Cancer can be very weepy and very emotional and say things that we don't necessarily mean to say, or really try to, you know, connect with people through our communication. And now that Mercury is in Leo, there can be sort of a domineering and dominating quality, where we think we know we're right, and what we say is the word of God, and you know, we can find ourselves getting kind of feisty or one-upping each other in communication. So this is something to look at, especially because Mars is beginning a drishti here on Mercury. It's not very tight degrees, but we can see that there's still some connection where Mars is sending its energy there. And then Saturn is also giving, oh no, Saturn is not giving a drishti there. Phew, that would be just too much. Saturn's drishti is actually on Jupiter, which I'll talk about in a second. But this quality of fieriness in our speech is one we have to be careful of, because Mercury really does well in the grounded earth signs, and when he moves out of Leo, he'll be in Virgo. And the reason is because we have a quality and a capacity to speak very clearly and slowly and grounded, and not have our passion, our fire, dictate the words that fly out of our mouth. Likewise, when Mercury's in water signs, we have a lot of emotionality and emotionalism, and sometimes even some controlling energy, where we're trying to get somebody to connect with us through our speech. So the lack of clarity in speech that we have for these two cycles is something to just note, because it affects our relationships quite a bit. Both Venus and Mercury are the two really relational planets. So wherever they are is really going to show a lot as far as our relationships. And particularly, again, for people who are like a Cancer rising right now, or even a Capricorn rising right now, this is going to be very strong effect here, because you have Venus on your rising sign and the sun on your rising sign, and the moon and Saturn in your 7th house. So relationships are heavily highlighted here. Likewise, if you're a Capricorn rising, you have Venus and the sun in your 7th house. And this is, you know, this is again highlighting relationships in two very different ways. With Capricorn rising, it could be sort of feeling some more depression on the front end, and feeling your own emotionality on the front end, and really looking to your relationships for happiness and light and leadership. If you're a Cancer rising, you could be feeling more, you know, a little bit more happiness or lightness on the front end, and really seeing pressure and, you know, some depression and things like that from your relationships, and the like the restriction or the constriction that you can feel from relationships itself. So there's very different energy running for different people. And of course, for other signs, it's going to be different houses altogether. This is, you know, this is a career house for a Libra person. So really a lot less to do with relationships. So everybody has their way of experiencing these energies. And that's why I try to do those reports for all 12 signs, to allow people to really reflect on where in their chart this energy is coming up. The thing I sort of mentioned for a brief moment here with Saturn is Saturn is giving drishti to Jupiter here. And one of the things we really experienced during the pandemic, particularly in the 2020 into 2021, was that Saturn was not just in Capricorn, giving us this sort of depressing wake-up call, but Jupiter was also in Capricorn and then in Aquarius, in Saturn's two signs. So our capacity for wisdom and growth and expansion was also really constricted. Whereas right now, Jupiter's in his own sign. He's in Pisces. And so we have an opportunity to really feel more expansive in our wisdom and in our generosity of spirit and our beliefs and our ideals. And we have a capacity to really understand things on a much, much deeper level. Even when Jupiter's in Sagittarius, there can be a lot of dogma involved. Jupiter in Pisces really starts to break the lines and have a oneness as part of our spiritual or philosophical belief system. So it's very powerful. Now, Jupiter is retrograde, and he is also internalizing energy as a result of that. The retrograde planets are not just sort of slowed down. We see that the manifestation in the world around us tends to be less when we are in retrograde with certain planets. So Saturn and Jupiter go retrograde for very long periods of time, and they affect us on actually a much bigger level than Mercury retrograde does because of that, because of the length of time that we're experiencing this. And particularly depending on what they rule in your chart, it can be a big deal. You know, if Saturn is your ruling planet or Jupiter is your ruling planet, this is sort of like your own self being delayed. And it's delayed for 4 to 6 months, not just 3 weeks like Mercury or Venus. So this internalization and this delay of things that are Jupiterian can really have us questioning our beliefs, questioning what we believe in, questioning our teachers or our teachings, and a need to re-internalize our relationship with those things. So we're needing to really dive in deep. Because Saturn is giving drishti here, we're seeing that there's going to be a little bit of that constriction and that extra practicality that Saturn brings to the table, where we're like a little less expansive and a little less willing to believe everything is possible, and a little bit more like, well, but this, you know, this depressing fact is also true. Or there's a quality when Saturn and Jupiter interact where we can almost become atheistic and unbelieving, because Saturn does bring up that quality where nothing is real. It's sort of a nihilistic quality where it's like, what's the point? Nothing matters. Nothing will bring us what we want in the end. And in a way, the highest beliefs also have that in them, right? There's these wide, expansive beliefs and devotion and all these things that can really bring us to source and bring us to spirit. And then there's that reality of, in the end, we're all alone. In the end, it's just us. In the end, you know, none of this is really true. It's all part of a big play. It's all part of a big illusion, a mass illusion that we're living in. And so Saturn brings that realism that can also take some of the hopefulness or the excitement out of the picture, but can really, if we have deep spiritual practices, help us cross the bridge from living in illusion, living mired in the Maya, and then really being beyond that, which is even more beautiful and even more enchanting than the Maya itself, which it can be hard to really see until you see it. It's hard to embrace that which is more depressing or sad or lonely as being beautiful until you really move past it and see it for yourself. So it's an extra step on our path that we can go, if available. But truly, for many people, it will be slightly depressing or bring down the pitch of whatever excitement we had around something. So that's something to be aware of. And the one other thing I wanted to mention with regards to Venus, I know I'm jumping around a little bit here, but Venus is in Cancer right now, and then moving into Leo, where we become like, instead of just trying to do and do and do to make somebody want to be with us, we start to get a little bit domineering and really want to be put up on a pedestal and think of ourselves as the, you know, most important person in the relationship. And again, these transits are tricky because both partners usually feel this way, or all partners if you're in a multiple partner setting. And then Venus becomes debilitated in Virgo, where we have this really kind of, again, constricted view on happiness, and everything has its place and has to be a certain perfect way. And we want to be perfect and pure and clean. And of course, happiness doesn't usually come from that, nor does, sensuality or romanticism come from that really, lined place trying to be perfect and clean and pristine and pure. And so we can see that our relationship energy has really entered a period of challenge right now. And that even if it's not a relationship planet for you, which for many of us it's not, it's a relationship planet for you. Venus rules your 7th house. So for Scorpio people and Aries people with a rising sign of Scorpio or Aries in the Vedic system, Venus is very much your relationship planet. It is the ruler of your 7th house. And even for Taurus and Libra people, it's your ruling planet. So it's, it has to do with yourself, which also is part of what you bring into relationship. But for everybody, all the different rising signs, it's still it's still the indicator of relationship. It's still that planet that shows how we feel about ourselves in relationship, particularly if you're female, and if you are, romantically attracted to women, it can really indicate like what kind of women you're into, or what that ideal woman looks like for you. But for all of us, it's going to indicate our happiness, our sensuality, our capacity to compromise, the way we are in relationships, how we relate to one another. And it is definitely going through a cycle of challenge over the next few months. So something to be aware of and to breathe into, and to really focus on the self again and again and again. What can you do for yourself? Because whatever you're bringing into the relationship is going to be the biggest factor in the end. And in the end, the most important thing is not actually that relationships last, or that our career lasts, or that we achieve anything in the outside world. The most important thing is that we're in integrity with ourselves and whatever path we walk in this world. So I'll leave you with that, and many blessings on your full moon. I will see you again soon. If you have not already signed up for my email list, it's at www.radhahomeyoga.com. I have the website listed right below this video. And if you sign up for my website or my email list, you'll receive bi-monthly reports on the full and new moon, and then these special transit reports that I do for all 12 rising signs. And right now, it's Jupiter for all 12 signs in Pisces, and Rahu Ketu, the nodal axis, in Aries and Libra for all 12 signs. And I might re-release my Saturn in Capricorn one that I did at the beginning of 2020, so that people can, again, remind themselves of where Saturn is visiting for now, and will be until the end of January 2023. Have a blessed full moon. Namaste.